What I learned about my anxiety, which was later then also projected onto my relationship. So I resonate with a lot of your content and your clients, but I had to learn how to not constantly mentally try to fix, check, control his behavior. And I had to learn how to just accept that like this is what it's like being in a relationship and living with someone else. Sometimes he doesn't do it the way that like I'm gonna do it. And like I have to just be with the discomfort of that without going into, is this right? Is this supposed to be happening right now? Should he have done the other thing? That was causing me so much distress, not him. And that took me a long time. And I'm glad that I had someone who was really patient and was like, this is not me. This is your stuff. And he didn't really shame me for that. It was just he could see it really clearly because he wasn't inside of it, which I think is really helpful. So I wonder too, like if your partner has been that for you, where it's like, okay, this is you're mentally spiraling again, but I'm here and we're gonna get through
Yes.
it.
Yes, it's happened multiple times, and that's part of the reason. I mean, we aren't just with someone for the things they give us, obviously, but when someone can give us a really special gift of their presence or reflecting back something to you, it helps you appreciate, like, wow, I'm actually with a great partner who like understands me. And whether it was 5 years ago in 2020 when I was like, I don't know if I love you the same anymore and was like full on spiraling to
Yeah.
last week when it was like, oh my gosh, my business, there's all this stuff and I don't know if I'm doing it right. He's like, let's not do that right now because I can tell the state that you're in is like the headspace you're
Yeah.
in is not in the place where you're going to think of things in the way that will help you move forward, you know?
Mhm.
So I do feel lucky that I also have a person who can help me do that. But I do think that it's also about looking within to know that it's not just that other person's job to help you through those negative emotions. Like we need each other. And that's why I think coaching or therapy or friendship or communities, like those are all great because you can be in those spaces with people, but not relying on those people to fix your negative emotions, I think, is also a balance that I'm still kind of figuring out because sometimes I do go to my partner hoping he will rescue me from those negative emotions I'm feeling.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what we do with manifestation. We're like, oh, I really want to manifest $1 million so I can be rescued from these negative emotions. And that really sets you behind the eight ball because, first of all, it projects a perceived future. So now we're not present anymore. And what's so ironic about that is because you keep projecting a perceived future where you're going to have whatever dollars or whatever job or whatever partner, that's why you experience the anxiety you're experiencing because you keep leaving the present. But in order to find more safety and comfort in staying present, we have to also be willing to be with what is present. And sometimes that is the anxiety we've been creating in our bodies by constantly worrying and doing these mental compulsions, going into the future, worrying if things are not going to be okay. We have to learn how to be in our bodies with that. And so I do experience a lot of compassion for myself and other people who keep leaving their bodies and like dissociating to some degree, whether it's through thought or through some sort of other habit, because to just be in your body and to not go into the mind is a very disconcerting process initially. You're like, oh my God, there's so much tension in my chest, or like, oh, my stomach is tight and like curling, or you might feel these heart palpitations. Like, there's a lot of things that are going on in the human body at any given time. And we as humans are able to kind of divorce ourselves from that. Like, we can actually kind of like live neck up, right? I feel like we're half of us, more than half of us, are just like walking heads, no connection to what's going on in the body. And so to be in the present and to give up your idea of a perceived future can feel really uncomfortable at first. But learning how to create a new relationship to the present moment and whatever it contains is what allows for you to open up and receive those things that you think are going to come from the future, because they don't come from the future, they come from the present. But you can't receive them because you're never in the present. And so a lot of manifestation work is about learning how to be in the present and receive, but it also involves you changing your relationship to what you perceive as negative that could be coming up in the present moment. And so we experience a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity. And rather than learning how to change our response in relationship to that, we say, I can get rid of this by getting someone to love me. I can get rid of this by getting a new job. I can get rid of this by achieving the next thing. I can get rid of this by becoming quote unquote successful. And so we actually never change the relationship to the negative feelings. And this is why it's very disappointing if people do end up being able to manifest the object of their desire. Like we've heard of celebrities, for example, like winning a Grammy or an Oscar, and then they say in some interview, like a year later, they went home and cried all night
Hmm.
because they finally got the object of their desire and then went home and were like, I still feel bad. And not even realizing that it was the anxiety or like the shame or guilt that kind of drove them to that place. And so regardless of whether you manifest your Oscar, Grammy, or whatever it is you're after, you will have to change your relationship to negative emotions because they're actually not negative. They're just emotions. They're just sensations and they're part of being human. And yeah, I think that we really romanticize and fantasize about being a human that doesn't experience any of that, but there isn't a human that doesn't experience any of that. And so this work, whether or not you are in the place of receiving your manifestation or perceive yourself to be far away, there's no place you need to be in to start changing your relationship to what you perceive as negative and learning how to befriend that because that is what's going to allow you to be more present to life and actually have you notice all of the abundance you are already soaked within. Like there's so much to notice, but you keep leaving. It's like I just kept leaving the present moment and I couldn't see all the goodness around me and that's a beautiful thing that happened in my relationship. Like the more present I became, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, Sarah, you're like, oh, you're actually like a really great guy. Sorry, I demonized you and was crazy. But it's like when you're present, you can notice those things as opposed to when you're in your mind, you're constantly trying to fix, control, or like block and shield yourself from bad things happening. It's so ironic. You're creating the bad thing that's happening. The bad thing that's happening is your compulsory pattern of trying to control. Like that's what feels bad. And it's so ironic because you think that's the thing that's going to prevent the thing that feels bad. But it's like there is no thing that feels bad besides the present pattern that you keep creating of trying to block them from happening. And again, like that's a sort of intellectual running around about that pattern, but it is a somatic awareness you have to develop of that. And to develop a somatic awareness, you have to be willing to be present with discomfort. Otherwise, you will dissociate to some degree.